Hello everyone, welcome to SwitchUp. In today's video we're going to do something very different. This is hopefully the start of a new series, depending on whether you all enjoy it. But we're going to look at some of our favourite series, video game series / franchises of all time. So we're going to have two each in today's video. Then we'll do a part two where we look at a couple more each. Just delve into our thoughts on the series, and maybe our favourite games within that series when we first played them, etc, etc. Just have a chat basically about it.
Absolutely. Yeah, let us know yours in the comments as well. What are our favourite series? Let's find out.
Okay, I'm going to start then, and I'm going to start with a series that I really do love and still do to this day. I was playing it the other night, funny enough, and that's the Street Fighter series. So going all the way back to, well, I'd say I probably played this first on the Super Nintendo, then the arcades. I think I probably played it first on the SNES. I remember my cousin had it, but I remember kind of the furore around it of what big deal it was that the Super Nintendo had it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, don't get me wrong, it wasn't an arcade perfect port, but the fact you could play it on a more mainstream console, you didn't have to buy something like a Neo Geo to play a game of this quality was a big deal back then, you know?
So this might be common knowledge, where did it come from? Was there another fighting game that kind of led into Street Fighter, or did they just got an idea, boom?
I was reading about this the other day, funny enough. The developer of Street Fighter had created another game before he worked for Capcom. His name was Takashi Nishiyama.
Yeah.
And he'd made a game called Kung Fu Master, which was more of a beat 'em up. But his idea was to take the boss sections from that game, which were more like what we'd now know as one-on-one fighters, and turn that into its own game.
Right.
And he then created the first Street Fighter, the kind of lesser known one. And in that one you played as Ryu, and Ken was there as a player 2. You could choose him as a player 2, and that was it. And it had the host of characters in there, or the cast of characters that you fought against. The vast majority for a while disappeared. You had Sagat was your final boss.
Yes, I remember you saying that.
He obviously reappeared, and a couple since have made appearances in the later games. But for a while, that cast were just completely discarded, you know?
Yeah, so would you say that the earliest beat 'em up, this is a beat 'em up, no, sorry, fighting game, sorry,
yeah, that's right.
was IK?
International Karate, yeah, on the, well, I played it on
it's the earliest one I can think of.
It's certainly one of the earliest, yeah, which was a very different game.
Yeah.
It was quite slow in terms of waiting for your moves and stuff. You have things like Barbarian as well,
Yep.
which was another one back then. But yeah, this series really brought it to the mainstream, you know. And then you had SNK doing a lot of fighting games back then as well, and there was a rivalry between the two companies. And these days you get things like Capcom versus SNK, which is good. You know, it's nice to see that kind of that bringing together of the two. But yeah, Street Fighter 2 and all its iterations were, back in the day, they were just massive, you know. So you had 2 World Warriors, then you had 2 Turbo, then you had Super Street Fighter, then you had Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. It just went on. And then when everyone was expecting Street Fighter 3, I remember, like, when's 3 going to come?
Yeah.
Then they went and did the Alpha series and went back to the beginning.
Right.
And then finally they got to Street Fighter 3 many, many years later. And then we've since had 4, 5 and 6, of course.
Do you like the transition to 3D?
I prefer the old school pixel art ones. They'll always, for me, be that kind of the king. And I did enjoy actually the Ultra Street Fighter 2 on the Switch that did, or remade that game, but used a hand-drawn art style.
Right, okay.
I thought that looked really nice actually. And you could switch between the old and new. But just everything about this series, I mean, the characters are iconic by this point. The music is just amazing.
Yeah.
Like Ryu or Ken's themes, if you hear them, you just instantly think of Street Fighter. I do feel that it's fallen into the trap a little bit, just for me at least, as years have gone on, similar to things like Mortal Kombat, where the need for more characters means they become more generic and less known, I guess. I mean, on the one hand, that's to be expected because they haven't got that history behind them, and that, you know, time is quite favourable and things like that, isn't it? You have that nostalgia, but just generally, I don't think their designs are as interesting for me.
Yeah, from a not huge fan, like you're a mega super fan of this series, the naming conventions are a little bit odd.
Right.
So, you know, I've got a few emulating devices, and it's got like Super Street Fighter, then you got like Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, you got like Turbo Ultra. It's like the name just gets longer and longer, and I'm like, what's the actual difference? It's confusing.
So Street Fighter 2, the first Street Fighter 2 had 8 characters.
Okay.
Then Street Fighter 2, I can't think which came next, apologies, but you had 2 Turbo, and as I said, you had Super Street Fighter. The next one along, whichever one that was, introduced 4 new characters.
Okay.
4 new playable characters. So you had Fei Long, Cammy, T-Hawk, and one other. I forget who the other one was now off the top of my head. DJ? I think it was DJ. But then Turbo increased the speed. You could increase the speed of the fighting. And then Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, one of them at least, had Akuma as another character.
Right.
And then started to change the lore. So whereas before it was all about fighting M. Bison, suddenly Akuma was kind of this behind the scenes big bad, ultimate big bad, you know.
Okay.
They just refined that particular game rather than move on to a new entry.
It felt as, I can't remember when I first saw like that premise, it did feel, from a consumer standpoint, like they were just kind of recycling.
I mean, if you play the games, they're very different.
Right, okay.
They are very different. But I can see why you do
Yeah.
that, of course. You know, it's the same named game, effectively, with a new tagline, you know. But there are a lot of differences within them. And I think I prefer that than move on to a third entry and perhaps dilute the brand, almost refining it on that second entry.
Yeah.
And then when they were ready, moving on to a new storyline and what have you, you know. But it was an odd way of doing it,
Yeah.
you know. So I know this is a series you don't play as much, but obviously just through osmosis, and I'm sure playing it at some point. Have you got any favourite characters at all?
Osmosis just seeped into me. Zangief.
You like Zangief?
Who doesn't like Zangief? No, I always liked, who's the guy with the long arms?
Dalsim.
Dalsim.
Yeah,
I don't know
he's
why I liked him, because he was a pain to play as.
That's probably why. If you can't beat him, join him.
Very true, very true. Stretchy arms. It seemed like it would be a cheat code. I used to think like, you know, with him, you're unbeatable. You're very beatable.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few like that in the earlier games. I like Blanca with his electricity.
Yeah, he was
when
good.
you came against him, like just trying to get near him, it felt so hard. But then when you played as him, it's like, this doesn't seem as good as it should, you know?
Yeah, Chung Li with the kick.
And the kicks, yeah.
That was like, if I could get that down, I could just dominate my brothers.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, they just weren't getting close.
Do you remember the film that came out in the 90s?
Yeah.
Did you see it?
Of course.
Did you like it?
It was compulsory. I loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I love them all. I like that and Mortal Kombat. I loved them.
The Mortal Kombat film, he's great.
I knew you wouldn't like this one.
It's just so weird. Like, the choices they made, like Ryu and Ken are some weird... I can't remember, they're like... they're selling guns on the black market or something. And
Hang on, what film are we talking about here? Have I seen this one? There's only one Street Fighter film, isn't
Well, there's
there?
more, but the one that I'm sure...
Has it got like Kylie Minogue as
Yeah.
Well,
and,
okay.
Raul Julia and stuff in.
Great film.
They're just... I don't know, the characters, they're like, let's bunch them all in. They've got to be there. What should they be? Don't know, car salesman? Why not? You know, like, got to get in there somewhere. Like, Chun-Li's a news reporter.
Yeah.
With E. Honda and Balrog as her team. Because, you know, just chuck them in.
Why not?
It's just a weird film. But then you had there was a Chun-Li film that's also crap.
Yep.
And then there's actually one that I watched recently called Assassin's Fist, which is actually pretty decent.
Assassin's Fist?
Yeah, it's like a, not a prequel, but it's like the origins of Ryu and Ken training under, is it Goken, their master, and you got Akuma, the origins of Akuma in there and stuff.
Oh yeah, I know him.
It's a good film. It started as a web series apparently. They pieced it together and made it a full-length film.
Yeah.
It's worth watching that one.
See, the difference is when I watched Street Fighter, the film, I was like, what, 15 years old, 10 years old, something like that, I feel like.
Yeah, but so was I, and still thought it was crap. But also, there was an animated one. I should mention that.
Yeah.
Street Fighter 2, the animated film, which is amazing.
Oh.
It's obviously an anime film. It's brilliant.
Right.
And it came out at a similar time, and just like made the other one look stupid, basically.
See, I was more of an anime man.
Yeah.
I was watching Akira, late night, Channel 4, good times.
Watch Street Fighter, the animated movie.
Is that
You
on
can find
Netflix?
it. I'm sure it'll be somewhere.
Yeah.
If you like your anime, you're going to like this. It's a very, very good film.
All right. Only the Strong. There's one person in the comments who knows what that is.
Good.
So it was like their version of Street Fighter. It was bad,
Yeah.
but I liked it.
Oh, there we go.
The thing is, we had 4 boys, so if it had fighting in, you were
it's a win.
fine.
Yeah,
Because
it's a
you'd
win.
watch it and then you'd fight.
Yeah. No, but I like the Street Fighter film, that one we were talking about to start with. Like, I know what you mean. Like, you're a kid, it's got fighting in, you're going to like it. But because obviously you had the Mortal Kombat one come out a couple of years later, and I'm not saying that's a great film. It's great fun.
Yeah.
But it just showed what you could do if you just treat the characters with a bit more respect, you know, like it could just be so much better than the Street Fighter one was. But there we go.
Que sera, sera.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so my first series then is the Final Fantasy series, and it's one that we have got quite a few of on the Switch.
Yeah.
A couple of the old school ones. We've got like, 7 and 8. But historically, my first ever one was actually 7. And I know there were much earlier ones, but I only played those in the Pixel remasters that we got more recently.
Yeah.
I love these games. Like 7 for me was such a big deal. I remember thinking, you know, it used to have those like pre-drawn backgrounds. Like I think there's still a place, we've spoken about this before, I think there's still a place for that style of art.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, in more modern games. And we've seen it in things like Disco Elysium. It's made a bit of a comeback. But I just absolutely loved them. It felt like I was taking control of a film, which perhaps has gone too far in that direction with the modern games.
Yeah, they're very cutscene heavy these days. Not just Final Fantasy, but just games in general, in my opinion. But it's funny with Final Fantasy because you can almost split it, certainly into 2, perhaps even further still. You had 1 to 6, which was like the Nintendo era.
Yeah.
And then 7 was on the PlayStation, and it brought in a whole new era in terms of how it looked and everything else. And I really don't know much at all about it after 6.
Right.
Whereas you started on 7, you know?
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm playing at the moment, I'm playing the 7 remake. I don't know I do know why I left it so long. I've left it so long because I knew it was coming to Switch, hoped it would come to Switch 2, and then we could cover it in a review. And I wanted to play the whole lot as well. I was saying to Glen the other day, they released the remake, I'm sure most people know, but in 2 parts.
Yes.
So you had Final Fantasy 7, I think it was like Intergrade and something else, and the 2 parts make the whole Final Fantasy 7 game. I didn't like that. You know, I didn't want to start it knowing that it ended without the actual end.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough.
So I've waited, and it is so good. It's so much better than I thought it was or would be. And it also represents a shift in the way I enjoy games, because when Final Fantasy started to change into the more action-heavy Final Fantasy that we know today, I hated it.
Right.
As a kid, I was like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
It should be turn-based. I remember my brother getting a PS2 and showing me one of the Final Fantasies and being like, no, that's not Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
Like, I need to be able to stop the game and do my turns. And he was just like swinging the sword. I was like, no. But now, as an adult with limited time, I really appreciate that they've kept that element to an extent. You can like push a button, freezes it, and then you can do things, or you can just swing away.
I think a lot of series that are as old as Final Fantasy had that kind of crossroads of the 3D gaming era becoming a thing, and where do we go from here?
Yeah.
I refer it back to things like Mortal Kombat, with Mortal Kombat 4, I think it was, that went full 3D. And it was just, it felt like such a step backwards in some ways, but a step forward in others.
Yeah.
And I think they just had to refine themselves, a lot of these series, you know?
I think that's exactly it. It's finding, there's no better way of putting it really. It's refinding yourself. And there's a confidence in it that only comes, I think, after a few attempts.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they've certainly done that.
Absolutely. Because another thing about this series is that a lot of the games, or a few of the games at least, in those early 6 didn't make it over here to the UK.
Right.
So they made it to the US, but they changed the numbering of them because some entries hadn't gone over there.
Well,
so
that's confusing, isn't it?
It's so confusing. So Final Fantasy 6, as it's kind of commonly known now, was Final Fantasy 3 over there.
Right.
It was the third game released over there. It just didn't release at all over here. So you kind of heard about these mystical games, or mythical games rather, that you just couldn't play other than obviously importing. And in a text-heavy game like an RPG, it's difficult. And so we were kind of behind in the series a little bit. So I played 6 kind of years after the fact. But it was an amazing game. Like the storytelling, the level of storytelling, like the premise about this world that moved into a mechanical age and magic was now outlawed. The music, music was just unbelievable. But I never got, because I didn't have a PlayStation, I kind of just forgot about the series for years. And then obviously I knew it existed, but just didn't play it. And it's amazing to see how it's evolved. Yeah,
it's changed massively. I would say on Switch, the nearest we get to like the next step is that Fantasian Neo Dimension that I reviewed.
Yeah.
That was originally only released on Apple Arcade, but I believe it's from one of the creators of the original Final Fantasies or Final Fantasy VII and things. And you can feel it, like it's got that same DNA. So if you're after something that kind of bridges the gap before you wait for the new games, check that out.
Nice. My final one for this entry at least, I'm going to talk about Resident Evil.
Resident Evil.
That's the one. It's funny because both of my games have been Capcom games, and obviously I've got a list of ones for future episodes. There's a lot of Capcom in there. I do like Capcom as much as they do things that annoy people and whatnot.
Yeah.
Their games historically are just amazing.
Mm.
And Resident Evil, again, like as I said, I didn't have a PlayStation, so I didn't play these. I did play them back in the day, sorry, but I didn't own them.
Right.
I played them through friends' consoles. You know, like you'd have a games night and you'd all go around one of your mate's house and you'd bring your console with you. So I had like the N64 and my mate had a PlayStation. And you'd be showing them some of the games that you had, and they'd be introducing you to games that you just hadn't played at all. And I remember playing, funnily enough, I played Resident Evil 3 Nemesis first, just a quick little bit of it. And I was like, what is this? Like, this is unbelievable. Like, I'm loving this. And then played Resident Evil 2, because they did bring that to the N64.
Yeah.
It was one of the best games I'd ever played at that time.
The start where they're all on fire and like staggering around, it's carnage.
Well, funny, the tank controls, I remember the first screens, as you say, there's that big explosion of the truck, isn't there? And you get separated from, you either play as Claire or Leon. And I remember on that first screen, I just kept walking into the fire because of the tank controls. I couldn't control it, and I thought I'd been robbed of 50 quid. I'm so glad I persevered, because after you get past that, it's actually a very good game. Yeah,
it is. And it's a lot better than 3.
Yeah, it is a lot better than 3. I think 3, it was just, because obviously you get chased by Nemesis quite early on.
Yeah, you do.
There was just something about it, because I love horror. I was like, oh, this is great. And then played 2, and you're right, it's infinitely better. And then played the original after the fact, and that actually held up well, because you know sometimes you play a second entry and then the first one would feel quite archaic.
Yeah.
But they were quite similar in their control schemes and whatnot. So going back to the first one was fine. And then played the remake on the GameCube some years later, and that was just another level. It was just unbelievable. Like, it's, to this day, I still think it's one of the best remakes that's ever been.
Yeah, well, I miss the old school janky cutscenes.
Yeah,
I liked the terrible acting. I felt like that was part of. I mean, I'm not saying the new stuff is much better, but I certainly liked some of them. They were shocking.
It had a charm to it, didn't it?
They did. I remember someone was in a jail or something. That must have been in number 2.
2, there was a character in a jail that you had to try and find. His name was Ben something, I think. But there are famous lines, aren't there? Like in the first one, when Jill Valentine's in a room and the ceiling's coming down, and you get saved, and a character called was it Barry? Is it Barry Burton? Says to her, "You were almost a Jill sandwich." It's just what it's just funny. There were just some very odd lines in there. But the series, like, so you had obviously the first one. 2, I think, is one of the best. They've done a remake for that, of course, in recent years, haven't they?
Yeah.
3 was okay. 4, for some people, is the pinnacle. For me, it was the start of a move away that I don't like so much. So whilst I appreciate 4, I almost resent it a little bit for changing so much, you know?
I do. I think I felt the same until you finally convinced me to persevere with 7. And 7 was one of the scariest horror games I've ever played. Like, I just thought the atmosphere was incredible. Yeah. And then I actually think 8 is really good as well.
I think 7, we were talking about Alien Isolation the other day, and this 7 reminds me of that in some ways, in that the first hour, maybe 2 hours, are it's some of the scariest stuff
it's horrible.
the game has ever done. It's like being stuck in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like it feels like that. But then it starts to just unravel a bit as you go on. For me, at least, story-wise, the game's still good, but story-wise, 8's very good. It's very strong. It was quite interesting how they tied it all back into Umbrella, because 7 looked like it had moved away completely. It was different characters. There was no real clear indication that it was even the same thing anymore. A couple of little nods, but nothing major. So 8 did a good job of tying it all back together. But I do miss the, the pre-rendered backgrounds, moving from screen to screen. I don't miss tank controls. Like you could have that game. You do have that game these days without the tank controls, and it plays just fine. Doesn't really spoil anything for me. But I love those first few entries. I love everything about it. Like, even there's been a couple of films, haven't there? I mean, you had the ones with what's her name, Mila Jovovich.
That one.
First film with that was okay. Didn't really. I remember watching it. I was on holiday in like Spain, somewhere like that. And you know, you go to bars and they have films on the screen to try and entice you in. And they had Resident Evil on this screen, and I hadn't seen it. I was like, oh, nice. And for the first 25 minutes. I was like, have they put the right film on? Is this what's this got to do with Resident Evil? And then the second one tried to tie it back into the films, to the game, sorry, a bit more. You had Jill Valentine was in it, and it tried to go. They had Nemesis in it and stuff. It was a bit hokey, but it was okay. Yeah. And then it kind of started to unravel. But then they did one recently called Welcome to Raccoon City, which I don't know what the general consensus is of it. I mean, it certainly is a love letter to the series. Like it sticks very faithfully for the most part to the series, and I enjoyed it for what it was.
Yeah.
You know, but I love Resident Evil, and long may the series continue.
Yeah, I actually finished 7, and you're right. At the end of it, when it suddenly, no spoilers, shifts more towards Umbrella, you're like, that seems like they just shoehorned it in.
Yeah, obviously because it's such a fantastical part of the story, and it starts off quite realistic in air quotes, that they don't really mesh very well together. And yeah, for me it lost its way a bit. But if they'd have, I think they even needed to keep it separate and almost be a reboot or a prequel or something, or just stay with the whole Umbrella thing from the start. And to try and bring the two together was a bit weird. But I do think that Village 8 corrected that to some degree. Yeah, you know. But yeah, no, I do love this series. They're brilliant games.
All right, the last series then that we want to talk about from my side, I think you've done yours, that was your last one,
too,
is the Elder Scrolls. Now, it's very pertinent, isn't it? Because we've just had the Elder Scrolls Oblivion series or game drop, not on the Switch.
No, It's
dropped on the other side. We have Skyrim on our one. It's been, I was saying this to Glen yesterday, it's been so nice, because my daughter said to me the other day, she was like, I want a proper game. I was like, what do you mean? You've been playing loads of games. She was like, no. You always talk to me about these proper games. I want a proper game to play. Yeah. So I was like, all right, why don't you try this? Like, she's obsessed with cats. And in Skyrim and Oblivion, you can create like this cat-like race called the Khajiit.
Yes, I remember, yeah.
So she's created this cat person, and she started playing, and it starts out on, you know, you got old Patrick Stewart rocks up, and he's like, the 9, blah, 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 blah. And then you do all this stuff. And she was a little bit scared, you know, because there's these giant rats and stuff.
Right, yeah.
So she's like creeping through. Like,
you start in prison, don't you?
You start in prison, and then there's a prison break that you kind of follow along, and it gets attacked and stuff. And she was a bit scared, and I remember feeling the same thing, you know, when I very first played this. We weren't super young. It's probably like in my early 20s, maybe.
I would say so, yeah.
Something like that. But I don't like scary games, so anything that's in dark, dank conditions, I'm a bit like apprehensive of. But then she emerged into the open world. Yeah. And like her face, man, she was like, oh man. And she went, I'm here, and my objective is 2,000 meters that way. And she just ran off a cliff, just swan dived into the water. I was like, yeah, you forget that like awe and wonder, don't you?
Yeah, you do.
So she's swimming around, like slaying crabs and stuff. And I was like, man, this is a good game. She was like, oh, do I have to go over there? And I was like, no, you really don't. You know, just go wherever you want. She's like, what? She's like, what about up there? You know, points to the highest mountain, spends the next 3 hours trudging up there. It's like, there's nothing up here. Like, no, there isn't. but you made your way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I know you'd played this, hadn't you?
Yeah, this was the first of this series I had played on the Xbox 360. And it was one of the first games on that console that I got 1,000 gamer score for.
Nice.
And yeah, no, it was similar, I guess, because I hadn't really played anything like that. I'm not a PC gamer, you know, really, not for those sort of games anyway. And I think I was the cat race as well, funnily enough, when I started. And yeah, it was just, you like you say, once you're out of the prison and you're in this whole universe basically, and it's off you pop, go and do something, do what you want, really. It was unbelievable, you know, going to people's houses and talking to them. Because I suppose the closest I'd played to it, and it's not close at all, is something like the Super Nintendo Zelda games. From that top-down view, but, you know, finding your way and going into towns and stuff. And to do it in this fully realised open world suddenly was unbelievable, really.
I love that they've released this the way they have.
Yeah.
I really do. It's like no nonsense. It's like, there you go. It's slightly confusing that it's called a remaster.
Yeah.
Because it isn't. It's a ground-up remake.
Full remake, yeah.
Like, everything's different. Still so buggy. Like, but she was like, oh, there's these bubbles coming out of me. And I was like, oh, you must have done a magic spell. No magic spell. Just this massive glitch. Right. She has these bubbles constantly coming out of her character. I was like, Yeah, it's kind of part and parcel. And another thing, like, you would always hit the quick save constantly.
Yeah.
Because one, it was buggy, and two, just bad things happened. So
Sure.
she's just spamming that quick save every second. I'm like, okay,
So
welcome.
in terms of the series, so the third one was it Morrowind? Is that right?
Morrowind came before Oblivion, yeah. So would
Yeah.
that be the third?
Yeah, because
I lose track of the numbers.
Oblivion was 4, wasn't it? And Skyrim is 5. I don't think I've ever really known anything of 1 and 2.
No.
Have you played
No,
those?
not at all. No, they were before my time. My
Right.
first was Morrowind.
Yeah.
And it was just like a much jankier version of Oblivion.
Right.
Like, to the point where it was completely hands off. And I found that with a lot of older games, especially on the PC. You used to have to persevere to find their game.
Yeah.
Now they're expected to deliver it to you on a plate.
Yeah, of course.
It's like, here's the game, here are all the mechanics, here's a 50-hour tutorial, there you go.
Yeah.
But in the day, it was like, like It Came From the Desert is a classic example.
Yeah.
That game's hard even now. I went in, I was like, what am I doing, man? So yeah, no, I'd never played the earliest ones.
I do find it weird that we've not really seen remasters of those two games, but also things like Fallout 1 and 2.
Do you mean a like direct?
Either, I mean, anything. Either a direct port of the older games or a complete remake.
Well, that would be
/remaster.
Fallout 3, unless you're talking about just of those two.
The original ones that were more asymmetric, because
Yes.
3 was the first one that went into a 3D world, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Of
and
that series.
I'd say that's Bethesda and Microsoft. Let's do our 3D ones that can make more money as we
Right.
go. Because 4's not just come out, but they put a load of money back into. Have you heard of Vault 76?
No.
So there was an online game they made. It was very much like Fallout, the newer ones,
Yep.
online,
Okay, right.
and it tanked at launch.
Right.
It was just crap. It was rubbish, and then it still had this following, and they kept working on it, and that's actually very good now. So I think they've been a bit like GTA 5. Like, why has it taken? Has it been 15 years since that came out?
It's been a long time. Yeah, it's got to be nearly that long, isn't it? At least.
It's mad, and I think people would be happy that they get the product that they not deserve, but has shown the time put in. But in that time, they were putting all their money into GTA Online.
Right.
I think it's similar. I think behind the scenes, Bethesda have been like, actually, this is making us a decent bit of buns here.
I suppose, because GTA is another good example with 1 and 2, before the third one again went into a 3D environment. I suppose they feel that there's nothing to do with those earlier games because the 3D ones have kind of done it since.
Yeah, 3 was almost the remake. Yeah, because I have played the early Fallout 1 and 2 games, and there's so much similarity.
Right, so they run their course and...
I think so, but I wouldn't put it past them to re-release a remaster that was those games, but in a nice, crisp... It would be lovely.
Yeah.
They're great games.
There we have it then. So that's part one of, as we say, a new series where we just talk about some of our favourite series or franchises. I mean, that's 4 very good franchises right there, isn't it?
Decent.
And we've got a lot more to come if you're interested. But do tell us yours down below. We love reading about people's favourites because that's where you get the passion for things, isn't it?
Yeah, and you get the little obscure ones as well.
Absolutely.
There's a few in here, we've talked about, like It Came From the Desert. I'm sure there's people that are like, what about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll have a little read.
Yeah, for sure. Don't forget, if you're looking for eShop credit to pick anything up from the eShop, you can use our website, switchup.gg, to get your eShop cards, and you get yourself 5% of your purchase price back as cash back. And there are links to places such as PlayAsia down there if you're looking to save some money from there. Thank you to our patrons and our channel members for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.